Viewer request time. We're going to be looking at the difference between silicone putty and liquid silicone for mould making, and I'll be including why I use each for the purposes that I use them, so you can perhaps understand my thought process. First of all, we're going to look at the silicone putty. This is the lovely purple one from Apex Resin. I presume they still do it. I've had this pot for ages, and these pots rather. So I'm presuming that they still do it. Is you take about the same amount of each, and here's a point: don't work straight onto a silicone mat. I'm just going to grab a piece of paper. This is silicone putty, and the same goes for liquid silicone. The silicone mat starts to absorb it, and it just makes a sticky mess of your mat, and it can make it like bubble and things too. So this is all we do. We're going to make some moulds with this. I'll explain why I'm using this for this particular purpose as I modge. You take equal amounts of each part of this putty. There's a few brands out on the market. I just like this one because I find it particularly easy and it's purple. And you modge it until you get it to one solid colour. And that's when you've got your parts mixed. And that isn't as difficult as it sounds. As you can see, we're almost nearly there. It normally comes with a measuring scoop, but I've had this so long that I've lost the little scoop, so I just used a kitchen spoon. Now, I tend to use this for making shallow moulds for smaller pieces. And the reason for that is you can just push them into it, and immediately you have got a mould. Now, I'm going to get a little bit of paper here to put this onto, because it shouldn't stick to the paper. Shiny paper's better, or bits of plastic, or actually, have I got a bag? Here's a little plastic bag. Let's put it on there. It's easy to get off that. So all we're going to do now, and you have to work fairly quickly because it does cure pretty fast, but we're going to roll it roughly into a ball and then flatten it a bit like so, and we're going to push down. So we've got ourselves a fairly flat little pad. Sometimes you could roll it. I sometimes use the lid of the tub like this just to flatten it, but it does end up sticking to things, so just be careful what you use. But anyway, yes, you want a flattish little pad like so. And then I round it up a little bit, pull the sides up a bit so that it's sort of fairly flat on the top rather than domed off like that. Then I get our piece. I'm going to use this little cheap brooch I got from, I think, was it Temu years ago, for doing exactly this sort of thing with. And we're going to try and push it down evenly. So I'm pushing in the middle, pressing him down. I'm also going to push around the sides a little bit just to bring where the silicone has pushed away a little bit. So we're going to pull that up a little bit, so make sure we've got a really good imprint, and then I'm going to leave it, and within about 10 minutes we'll have a mould. So this is awesomely quick stuff. It's pretty impressive, and we should have a mould. Now it will use, we'll get a good number of uses out of it actually. It's surprisingly good stuff, but it makes quite a firm rubber, so it does eventually go, it doesn't work quite as well anymore and you end up making a new mould. But that's so quick and easy. It's not biggie, is it? Now, the reason I wouldn't use it for a bigger, deeper, more solid shape, like let's say this skull, is you're going to have to wrap an awful lot of the rubber around it, and you might not be able to get it into all the nooks and crannies, and it might be difficult to demold because it is quite a firm rubber. So I find that's where the liquid silicone comes in, and we'll look at doing that next. We'll also look at turning this into the sort of mould that I can use with the liquid silicone. But I bet by the time I finish telling you about all this, will have cured. The other thing is, if I was making something with a hollow back like this with the liquid silicone, I'd have to fill it, I'd have to take the clasp off for a start. And I would have to fill the back up with resin so that I'd got a flat base. Because obviously, as you can imagine, the silicone would just pour straight into the middle as well, and you're not going to end up with a... You just can't do it. It just doesn't work. I literally would have to take away, if I lift this up and show you, I'd have to cut off that bit there and this piece here, the pin, and all this would have to be filled up and levelled up to make a flat base. It's going to be quite tricky. You could do it, but it's tricky. Right, how are we doing? 5 minutes in, and you can still poke your nail in it just about. I'm going to give it another 5 minutes. So while that's curing, let's put it to one side. Let's make a mould from this first. So first thing, and I forgot to mention this with the other one, first of all, make sure that your original is clean, because any fingerprints and marks on your original are going to transfer to your mould, and then will be on anything you produce thereafter forever. So I've got a little mark on him there, I can see. A few little smudges, just using a bit of Wonder Wipe spray, like the wipes I usually use. They do a spray as well. It's quite noxious stuff, but it really does work. And there we go. So I'm going to let any moisture go from that now. And now what we need is a mould to put it in. Right, so let's have a look then. I've let him dry off and I've got my gloves because we're going to be starting to play with resin now. And this is a cupcake mould. So I know some people use the rather good resin mould frames, but for some small pieces, I quite like to use just these little cupcake moulds. Now we're going to use that to make our mould. But first of all, I'm going to make an original. And this is something I don't think I've showed you in videos before. Not sure. What we need to do is raise our original piece up slightly, and I also need to fill in that. So we're going to use ultraviolet curing resin to do that. And I've got the clear hard type ultraviolet curing resin from Let's Resin. Don't need to fill the whole piece in. This is glass, by the way, the original. I bought it from a tourist shop in Weston-super-Mare. But we're going to fill that up so at least it's level across the bottom. Don't need to go all the way across, but we are going to fill it up quite a way. And the reason we're doing this is so that we can obviously be able to demold the things that come out of it. And also I need to raise the bottom up a little bit. And that is because, well, you'll see from the next step, it'll make sense. So I'm raising the bottom up just with some ultraviolet curing resin. So those of you who've made moulds by just popping your pieces in yogurt pots and things before, this is how to take it to the next level. Now we're going to be raising it a bit further. And this is where I'm trying to make it because it's the same both sides, so we end up with a nice even mould. And that might be enough. I think I'll just put a little bit more down that centre. Just making sure it's not running down the mould itself. Down the piece itself, rather. You see what I mean? It's just flattening off across here. So I'm just going to put just a little bit more across that centre bit and here. So there's a lot to be said for just spending a couple of minutes preparing your base area. It will make your finished mould a lot easier to use. Now, I don't know whether this is a copyrighted design or not because it's a skull. I don't quite know if you can copyright skulls. We're going to put a little bit of resin into the bottom of these two pots. There's two because I've got another side project going on as well that I need to work on. This is just a regular 1-to-1 resin. It's Apex High Gloss. And I'm just going to put a little thin layer. Now, the reason for doing this is it will give us a solid base for our original, because then this will be a mould that you can use again and again and again by just taking the original and dropping it into a new one of these little pots. And these are cupcake pots from a cheap cookery shop. So we're going to let those cure up now. Now, while that's doing, let's get our other piece back. A little original with the silicone putty is cured. 10 minutes tops. Brilliant, eh? So we're going to pull that out. And we have got a ready-made little mould. Nice and easy. Now, the only thing I always have trouble with is making sure it's completely flat. As in horizontal, level, proper. But we're going to soon find out because we're going to put some resin in and do a test pour. First of all, just make sure that if you pushed it, yes, look, I pushed down the silicone a little bit too much and I've left little holes on the back. So I'll show you how to fix that if you've done that little boo-boo like I have. What you do is you get a tiny bit more silicone, you modge up a fresh bit, just a little bit like that, and we're just going to put it on the back. So again, just modging it up till it's well mixed. It's a bit hard to see against my gloves, isn't it? It's about the right shade of purple. This video's got very purple, hasn't it? I promise when we test pour the skull and things, they won't be purple. How's that? So once we've got that modged well in, again, it's about 50-50. I might have got a bit more of the white in it this time. But as long as it's close enough, we're just going to put that on the back and we're going to go over where the holes were. So there you are. I just pressed down too hard, but actually it is quite a useful little exercise to be able to show you that if you don't quite get it right, you can fix it. So we're just going to let that cure. And while that is curing, I'll get the rest of this resin mixed up and I'll be back here with you in just a couple of minutes. Oh, there we go. That's cured. So let's do a test pour, shall we? We'll see how level I managed to get it. Same resin again, just normal 1-to-1. You probably could get away with one of the fast curing shallow pour resins for this because he is so shallow, but obviously I'd got a bit left over from the other things I was doing, which I could have used a shallow pour for, but it's what I've got open. It actually looks like I got it reasonably level. I think it could have been a little bit, tip him up a little bit that way, I don't know. Let's leave it as it is. I'm going to leave that to cure and find somewhere to tip this last little bit. Right, this little guy's cured. Let's get him out. We can see what our original looks really good actually, doesn't it? Now we're going to turn this into a permanent mould. Now, will he fit in there is the question. Yes, he does. Great. So we're going to do that with him. And I'm also going to do it with my skull. So this is where you're working straight from an original that you want a longer term mould with. This obviously is going to work really well for quite a number of mould out of that. I'll probably be using that for 20, 30, I don't know, 10. Very much depends on how it goes. But I have found that I can use them a lot, and it has got the sparkle run through it. Look, it's picked up the sparkle from the crystals, which is transferred to our little frog. So what we're going to do is put them into here. I'm just putting a little bit of resin down first. And this is why we wanted to raise them up a little bit, because you're immediately going to lose that very first layer. So I did over pour that slightly, but you're going to lose that very bottom. So where this is over poured slightly, that will raise it up. So let's drop him in. And I might have to keep coming and moving him to make sure he's still in the middle. That's that. Now, let's do our skull. And obviously this is straight from the original. We haven't made an original first, if you know what I mean. Now we could have tried to do that with the crystal frog, but we'd have had to fill all this up to make that flat base, as I was explaining earlier. Whereas with this, all we had to do to make the flat base was just to put a little bit of UV resin on it, which also raises it up so we don't lose we don't lose some of its depth at the bottom when we do this. Now this is sacrificing the skull because I'm not going to get it back out of this resin again. And I think we're good to go. I think those are both in place. Indeed they are. They're fairly central. It's hard to tell because I've got you in my way on my phone stand. Oh, by the way, for anybody who's interested, I'm still getting on very well with the Olivia phone holder, the thing that I'm holding this in. So anybody who's thinking of treating yourself to one of those stands, I'll put you the link down in this video description too. The other thing I've got here, look, this is where I'm going to use up my leftover resin. I've got some little frogs. And I'm going to be doing, at some point, a complete frog skein with these. So let's have a look and see what this mould looks like. This was a cheap one from AliExpress. But I want lily pads and all sorts. So let's see what those come out like. That's what to do with some of my leftover resin. Right, I'll see you later. They are now well and truly stuck in here. We've got our nice base. This one's tipped to one side slightly, but that shouldn't have any adverse effects on the of the mould. I've got some silicone all mixed up nicely. Big pot of it because obviously I've got two quite big moulds here. The trick is to make sure you've stirred it in really thoroughly. It's equal parts part A and part B, so nice and easy. Now this one isn't going to take much silicone because he's quite shallow, isn't he? But we do need to make sure that we've definitely got a layer over the frog so we don't get any holes or weak spots. So that's him. Then in with the skull. And obviously that's going to take quite a bit to go all up round him. And I hope he's not going to stick out over the top of the pot too much. Oh, that's cut it fine. Probably should have used a deeper pot really for this one. I think we've got him. Gosh, that's going to be close. Oh, I'm dripping on my mat. Should have done what I always said and put some paper under it, shouldn't I? Get that off quick. So that's going to be cutting it very fine on the top there. Might have to put just a little bit more silicone on the back of that later. No, just drop another little layer in. I didn't think about the depth. I should have gone for a deeper pot. We shall see. I might have to top it up. Right, there we go. We'll see you when those have cured. Right, let's have a demoulding of the mould. Now, the easiest way to do this is to peel these cups away, so you end up wasting some of these cups. But I buy them in big packs and they're very cheap, and of course it is biodegradable. And then all we're going to do is pull our mould off from there. And there we have a mould with a very nice, neat, she says hopefully, we haven't looked at it yet, have we? But a very nice, neat finish. Look at that. Isn't he perfect? And it's got a lovely clean edge to it. You can trim this edge off if you want, but I don't feel the need to do so. And if you want to use this again and again and again, just soak it in some water, get this off, and then next time you come to use it, all you do is you just drop it in the bottom of another one of these cups, and away you go again. Sorted. You'll find that this does come off quite easily. I won't bore you with sitting you watching that though, because that will take a while, obviously. Right, let's get our skull out, because this is a bit more 3D. So what you've got here is a seriously easy to make little mould. Beginner friendly, kids friendly even. Good for shallow, smaller pieces. And ones that you think, well, you'll get a good few uses out of it. Don't get me wrong, you will get a good few uses out of it, but this is a much more permanent solution if you want a really long-lived mould. And of course, if you want something a bit more 3D and chunky, particularly like this. We are going to chuck some resin in these in a minute. Here he comes. Look at that, and look how shiny it is inside. If your original shiny, your mould will be shiny. If your original isn't, then your mould won't be. Don't expect miracles, it can only do so much. I'm just going to drop these in some water and we'll soak that off the back. Let's get some resin in these, shall we? Now, as you can see, this one's a little bit lopsided. It is only for me anyway. I don't know about the skull, but that one's definitely a copyrighted design. The skull, well, there's that many skull moulds out there. We don't really need another one anyway, do we? And I don't know whether it's copyrighted. And it's lopsided, you see? Look, I put him in lopsided. It might not matter. In fact, that might stop bubbles sticking from some areas. But hey, obviously, if you wanted to make things like this yourself, you could take a bit more time over sorting that out. Now, what we need is some resin. And just happen to have an old cottage cheese pot here. So let's mix some in there. I'm going to have to guess how much I need. But we are going to put resin in each of these. Except for that one, because we've already done it, haven't we? But each of these we will. And we'll see what they look like. And we're using Resin epoxy resin. Nice one-to-one, dead easy to use. I'm a bit naughty, I tend to eyeball the amount, but I just have the knack of doing that. You should measure it, of course. Now, I might have a bit too much there. I don't know, because I want to dirty pour these. I've got a couple of nice mica colours that are just basics that have come from Let's Resin, and as we're using Let's Resin silicone and resin, let's carry on, shall we? So, get this all mixed up nicely. I'm not worrying too much about bubbles in it. If you stir slower, they will de-bubble, of course. If you stir slower, you won't get as many bubbles, of course. But I tend to go for it a bit too much. But this resin does tend to degas rather well on its own anyway. I have got a debubbling machine. In fact, I've got several. I've got every brand available to man if I needed to debubble, but I'm not going to worry too much for these. I know this will debubble on its own pretty well. So the two colours I'm going to do, and I might end up mixing a bit more up. This is just a bit of an aside really, isn't it? Not too worried about these. It's just to see what they end up looking like, isn't it? That's quite a lot. I went a bit mad with the pigment there. But that is just the bright blue from the Let's Resin range. They do go a little bit shinier and some go a bit darker when you mix them in to the resin. So I mix that as best I can. Should have gone and got some better sized pots really. And where's the purple? I've just discovered that these two colours go incredibly well together in another make I'm working on. These are actually from one of the Let's Resin kits. The resin, the mica, the stirrer, a jug, all the gubbins in it. You can see this all settling. Bubbles popping on the surface already. Nice. Don't know how much that skull's going to need, but I think I'm going to pour at that, and I've got some left in my pot in case we need any more. So we're going to go blue. Same with the frog, we'll do blue. Obviously he's only little, so we're not going to use as much resin for him, are we? Purple. Purple in his head. Blue again. I'm pouring this in the same spot each time, so we should get a layered effect. Well, that hasn't used as much as I expected, so let's see. Just going to leave that. And I guess we could do another one in this mould, couldn't we? But let's fill this little guy up first. And I've also got one of my standby into resin moulds here. It's one of their handmade crystal moulds, as we're talking handmade moulds today. There we go, that's self-levelling into his points. I might have overfilled a little bit there, but we'll see. It should settle, to be honest. There we are. I don't think we've got any resin going to waste here, have we? So I'll see you later for the demold of these, and we'll have a closer look at them, have some verdicts on the silicone that's used. Don't forget, because this silicone is also very translucent, it's really great if you want to make small moulds for your ultraviolet curing resin makes as well. So I find it very multifunctional. Now I've got a bit of clear left here, so I'm going to chuck that into something. Oh, hang on, I've got a fish over here. Let's put him in that. So I've got several projects on the go at once, so I have got a few moulds out. There, fish. And we're done for now. See you later for the demold. Right, so that's what I did with a bit of leftover. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? Anyway, let's get the little frog out. These are still very slightly soft. I'm just being impatient, I'm afraid. But this is my frog mould. There we are. Need a little bit of trimming around the edges where I poured a bit too much, but I think you'll agree that's a successful mould. And of course we've got our original one as well here that we can use. So beauty of this one, it's a lot softer silicone, and so it should last longer, and the fact that it's see-through, so you can do funky things with your ultraviolet curing resin. And let's get the skull out. Fingers crossed. And there we go. Oh, look at the colours mixing. Oh, that's nice. I did get a few bubbles trapped in there. That's my fault. I should have given it a little squeeze. But look how shiny it is. I think you can agree we've got some successful moulds here. Well, I hope that's answered your question about making moulds and what the difference between the liquid silicone is and the silicone putty. And you don't want to get all messy with the silicone itself, and you just want to make shallow stuff that you can just press into a putty, and it's really quick and easy. This is the way to go. Whereas if you want to do much bigger scale or a lot more mould making, and you want to be able to do chunkier pieces like this, and also longer lasting, and you want it to be able to get the UV light through it if you're doing UV work, then the liquid silicone is the way to go. There are a number of brands of the silicone putty out there. Frankly, there's not a lot in it. They're all very good. This one is actually from Apex. And I do use that quite a bit. The silicone, I use exclusively the Let's Resin one. As I said earlier, I have for a long time. I just find their silicones really good to use and easy too. So I hope that's answered your questions. I can't remember who asked me about this in the first place. If you're listening, please would you identify yourself down in the video comments and let me know if that's answered your questions, and if you've got any more, because I'll be delighted to fill you in. Thanks very much then, folks. YouTube thinks you would like to watch this playlist next because it is all about making moulds. I'll see you for the next one. Bye.